Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have a special roundtable, and this is specifically for the SURE program at the University of Saskatchewan, Student Undergraduate Research Experience. And today we have three professors, Amy Stevens, Stephen Ryan, and Raymond Spateri, who are here with us today to talk about why they hire undergraduate students and tell us about their experience of hiring undergraduate students and a few of the things around aptitudes that they look for and why they hire students, and some of their best stories of undergraduate students who've worked for them in the past, as well as some advice for us for students who might be looking for a summer student position. So Amy, I'm going to go to you first.
Okay, my name's Amy Stevens. I am a faculty member in the chemistry department here. I've only been a faculty member, well, this is my second year, so I'm still pretty new, but I did have the opportunity to supervise 3 undergraduate students this summer, which was a great experience. My research primarily focuses on optical spectroscopy, which basically means lasers. So I investigate molecules of lasers, and I also have started doing something called DNA origami, which is where you basically have synthetic DNA and you fold it as you would paper. So it's really DNA origami. So that's what I do.
Thanks so much, Amy. Stephen, could you go next?
Certainly. So thanks, Merle, for this opportunity to speak to the students today. So I'm a faculty member in the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. I'm also the director of an interdisciplinary research center on campus. It's called Quanta, which is short for the Center for Quantum Topology and its Applications. I supervise highly qualified personnel at all levels, the undergraduate level, graduate level, postdoctoral level as well. And at the moment, I would say I average about 8 undergraduate research assistants per summer. At least that's what I've done for the last 2. And my research, strictly speaking, my training is in geometry. I'm an algebraic geometer by training, whatever that means. It means I think about geometry and I think about algebra, but that doesn't really do justice to the story. I think also about how geometry and algebra intersect with physics, and that's where the interdisciplinary part of my work comes in. And very recently, in a very organic way, my research program has involved the mathematics of quantum materials. This is new, fantastic types of matter that we can build amazing things from, like quantum computers. And so through that, I also look at the mathematics of quantum computing.
Super, thank you so much. And Raymond, if you could go as well.
Sure, thanks, Merle. Again, thanks for the opportunity and great to see the attendance here. So yeah, my name is Raymond Spateri. I'm a professor in the computer science department here at the U of S. My area of research is something called numerical analysis, which also involves scientific computing and high performance computing. So really, I'm somebody who uses computers to solve mathematically formulated problems. I mostly solve differential equations for a living, so yes, I live the dream. I like to perform simulations of large complex systems. So, this kind of work allows me to work with a lot of cool people and a lot of cool problems. These days, just as a sampling of what we're doing these days, we are simulating, the electrical activity in muscle tissue, such as the heart. We're simulating the drying of things like potash and pharmaceutical powders in something called fluidized beds. We're doing with some work with the GWF, the Global Water Futures, the Global Institute for Water Security. We're doing large hydrological simulations over North America. And I also, being sort of a former physicist, doing some simulations with people in physics on plasmas. This past summer, I had 3 undergraduates working for, in my lab in the summer. And, typically I average somewhere between 2 and 4, each year, for the past, I don't know how many years now, too many to count. But that's typically, I do like to have a contingent of undergrads in my lab in the summer.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much. I can start my video as well to be here at least in spirit, although I am not the important speaker here. My curiosity is, and you guys, you can all jump in and just take turns, but why do you choose to hire undergraduate students? Why do you not just keep your projects just to graduate students and above? Why do you hire undergraduate students as researchers? And Raymond, since you're up, why don't you go first?
Oh, sure. Okay. Well, this is one of those peculiar things that I can't explain. So just for some unknown reason, I've always had an affinity toward undergraduate students. My first faculty job was at a place called Acadia University in Nova Scotia. And at the time, it only had undergraduate students. I was quite okay with that. I think that, so how do I say this? Undergraduates, I find, even though I have master's students and I have PhD students and postdocs and even a research scientist, so I mean, there's a whole gamut of people in my lab. I find that the undergraduates are sort of the freshest of the bunch, right? They're the most willing to learn new things. You know, maybe said differently, they're sort of the least stuck in their ways, if you will. So for better or worse, I'm the kind of person who likes to give people the opportunity to prove themselves. And I think that undergraduates have the most to gain from such an experience. You know, their life trajectories are, I would say, you know, the most positively impacted if they play their cards right in this kind of situation. So that's kind of, you know, that and the fact that you can kind of tell when you've got a good student or not. You can tell already as an undergraduate. You don't have to wait for them to become a PhD to sort of tell that they have the potential. And so, you know, I like to see that.
Stephen or Amy, did either of you want to jump in on that? Why do you hire undergraduate students?
Maybe I'll jump in unless Amy has something she wants to.
You can start.
Sure. Okay. Well, I agree with everything Ray just said. It's hard to say it any better than that. I would simply add that I think there are projects that legitimately are best suited for undergraduates. When you have a PhD student, that's 4, 5, 6 years of work that they're going to sink their teeth into. A master student, 2, 2.5, maybe 3 years, and of work that they're going to undertake. But there are some projects that are really just 4 months or 8 months that can be worked on, and these are they're going to lead to good results. They can lead to publications, or at least just something you can pat yourself on the back for, and it's good experience. And you could have a master's project that is knitted together from let's say 4 or 5 short projects, or a PhD project that's knitted together from many let's say 2 or 3 master's projects. That's fine. But I like to sort of avoid that and have projects that are the right length for the student. And so there are lots of things that you can let an undergraduate loose on that's going to with hard work and effort and learning is just right for those 4 months, or just right for those 8 months. And I guess what I'm really trying to say here is that undergraduates are an essential part of the research landscape. It's not it's not just undergraduates exist, let's try and do something for them. No, there really is undergraduate research, and we can give that to you, and you can feel proud about it, and we can feel proud about it.
Fantastic. Amy, anything more to add?
I don't have a lot to add because a lot of it has already been covered by Ray and Stephen, but whenever I think about employing undergraduates, I first think about my own experiences as an undergraduate, as a researcher, and just feeling how grateful I was to be given that opportunity to sort of turn to the dark side and become an academic, because that's where it really starts for you. If you get bitten by that research bug, it's probably when you're an undergraduate. So I like to pay it forward, and all that great experience I've had, try and give that to the new generation of scientists. But also, what I found this summer was just that undergraduates really challenge your preconceptions. You have a certain way of thinking about your science, and when they start working on beside you, they will come up with questions that you never even thought about. And you have to constantly reevaluate kind of your own research and how you think about things. And for me, that's really valuable. I mean, it's just amazing the kinds of things they think of. So that's really why I love undergraduates. They're fresh, they come in, they really challenge what you think. And that's kind of how you become a great scientist, by continuously kind of reevaluating how you think about things. So I really value their input.
I think that's really brilliant. And because I still have you on the screen, I'm going to ask you first and then go back through the panel. What particular skills or aptitudes do you look for when you talk to an undergraduate student and they ask you, can I, have a job? Can I work with you? What are some of the things that you look for?
I mean, I think the most basic ingredient I look for is enthusiasm. I want to know that if I work with them, they're going to be enthusiastic, they're going to work hard for me, and they're going to bring in something fresh, some new ideas. So really just enthusiasm. I mean, also as my research is very laboratory based, some basic lab competency is handy, but it's not really necessary. I would take a student from almost anywhere, and just as long as they're enthusiastic and they're interested, that will be enough for me. So that's kind of the ingredient I look for.
Sounds like an absolute key ingredient. Raymond or Stephen, what do you look for? What skills or aptitudes do you look for? And either one of you can jump in, and then the third one take turn.
Ray, do you want to go? Or
Go ahead, Steve.
Sure. Well, just like Amy, I would say enthusiasm. There are these sort of life skills. You don't want to apply for something or ask for a job in something you're not enthusiastic about. So definitely, just like Amy said, and determination. Research isn't necessarily a smooth path. It's ups and downs every single day. You think something is going to work out, but it fights back. It's not what you thought it was the week before. You have to go back to the start. You have to read a whole new paper that you didn't anticipate in a different language. Well, maybe a written language, but in a different scientific language or other kind of scholarly language all of a sudden. And these things are really the truth, the authenticity of research. And the quality that is going to be the most important, I think, is determination, to just keep going. You have to sort of attack your work, whatever it is, with a bit of a passion, and not let yourself sort of get thrown off the path too much by the little bumps along the way. So I want to see that determination. I can sort of often see that, when you first start talking to a student about research. And then I'm biased because I'm a mathematician, but math skills, and it's not just for doing a project with someone like me or the three of us happen to be scientists, but I think across the sciences and even outside the sciences, we have the Digital Research Center, and I'm sure an SSRL, Social Sciences Research Lab, I'm sure they welcome math skills very highly. So numeracy and math skills go a long way. Nothing in specific, but having a good quantitative sense, I think, is becoming more and more important in all kinds of research.
Ray, what do you look for?
Sure. So, I'll just, continue to pile on, if you will. There's a sort of an old saying that, people that when you're hiring, you hire for attitude and you train for aptitude. And this is a lesson that you'll probably learn when you go and try to find a job. Is somebody going to hire you for something that you already know exactly? Is this the thing that you know exactly what they need? No, that's not going to happen. You're going to know some theorem, and that's great, but are you going to use that theorem? Probably not. But what are you going to use? Well, you are going to use, the problem-solving skills. So that's, you might want to call those math skills, if you will, but it's just general problem-solving is what you're going to have to do, because this is a tough business, okay? Any business in which you need to become an expert is a tough business. There's lots of competition. you need lots of determination and resilience. You have to come in day after day and keep trying. Can't let a little setback stop you. So you definitely need problem-solving skills. In my particular instance, again, I'll show my own bias here, is you have to know a little bit of coding, right? So you can't necessarily come in and know no programming at all, but you also have to be open, right? So you might be a Python programmer. Yikes, sorry about that. You might be a Python programmer, and then all of a sudden, I need you to learn C++. You need to be open to saying, no problem, I can get it, right? Even though it's not necessarily as easy as you might think, because they are different ways of thinking in a way, but there's a lot of commonality, and it's the attitude that, no problem, I will figure it out. You also, in my sort of setting, you need to be a good communicator, so you need to be able to communicate with me, you need to be able to communicate to the other people on the team, so you need to be able to work with people on a team. Communication is really how you get your mathematical knowledge out to somebody else. Otherwise, it's of little value to them if it remains in your head. I mean, that might be good for you, but not so good for them, and not so good necessarily for the world either. And then the other thing is that you need to be a self-starter. You need to be able to work on your own. You can't get stuck on every little thing. You need to be resourceful and industrious and figure out, okay, this didn't work. Should I turn for help? What can I, where can I go for help? What can I do on my own to keep going? Maybe I have to let this problem go. I have another one, I can work on that. So these are the kinds of things that I would say are the ingredients for success.
That sounds brilliant, you guys. You all gave some really good ideas. How can students showcase to you that they have these skills, or are these skills that you think that they gain as they go through the process? Ray, since you're up on my screen, you can maybe think about that one first.
Sure. So I will admit, it's not the easiest thing to do if somebody you've never seen before shows up on your door, to know right away. But you can usually get a sense from just, how the person interacts with you in the room. It's imperfect. I admit I put a bit of weight on the transcript, because that, is something somehow tangible. And I do appreciate as much as anybody else that high marks aren't necessary nor sufficient to guarantee any of this, but they are a pretty good indication that it's something that you can say, well, you got these really good marks, and that means you are at least, good at that thing, or were good at that thing for that one semester. And that's something. Otherwise, you're kind of going on nothing, right? There's no track record. And I mean, track records are, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So again, if you seriously do a job, no matter in some sense what that was, this is some evidence that you can do it, and it's at least a starting point for me.
Stephen and Amy, how can a student demonstrate to you that they have the skills or the aptitudes that you're looking for?
I guess I'll jump in, if that's okay, Stephen. Well, how I did it, because I'm new at this too, so I basically just talk to the students who are interested. I think it really demonstrates that they've thought about it if they ask you some really good questions when you're talking to them. If they have no questions and don't even if it's just, so what do you do with lasers? That would, start a conversation. So I think some really good questions where they've obviously maybe read your website and have, or know something about your research, shows that they're truly interested. As Raymond said, of course, transcripts help, and I think I asked mine to just send in a CV, so just to see if they would send it in and how long it would take them and what kind of things they've done before. But I mean, of course, things like communication are really important, but also I really do believe that during the research, this is also enhanced. So I'm not expecting someone to come in and be perfect, but if they seem genuinely interested and seem like I think they would be able to contribute to my lab positively, then I would take them on. So that's just how I selected them this year. So, but I guess that process will evolve as I get old and crusty. So.
Old and crusty like me. I might be slightly older. Stephen, anything to add? How can a
I mean,
student prove to you that they have the skills that you're looking for?
again, I'm completely in sync with Ray and Amy. I would just add that for me, there are two paths along which undergraduates might come to you for research. I mean, one is certainly that they write to you, write to the prospective supervisor, or there's been a posting for an undergraduate position, and then I'm assessing, let's say outside material. So again, the transcript is very important. There'll usually be some courses that are somehow, very connected to the work. And so those are the courses that you want to have really good marks in. So, you need to choose the research opportunities you go for, with that in mind. And, likely, in that avenue, the first communication can be by email. So you want to, write a very professional, persuasive email. So I think, the communication skills, like Amy said, is extremely important. Of course, there's another avenue that the undergraduates you teach in your own courses are often natural candidates for who are going to be your research assistants, so there's a bit of a different dynamic there because you can impress the potential research supervisor through not only that final grade at the end, but there's the whole march towards that. The coursework, demonstrating your ingenuity. Often, I think there's some correlation between the students who taken an assignment I've given them and gone, completely in their own direction. Not ignoring the assignment, but doing the assignment in its entirety, and then taking it to the next degree and saying, here's what I did with this assignment, after the fact. And that's, very impressive to me. And there's some correlation between the students who've done that sort of thing and who've ended up working for me. So,
These are all fantastic. One of the questions that I asked the three of you to consider is, what are your best or worst or favorite stories of undergraduate research? And Stephen, since you're on my screen right now, you get to start this one off.
sure.
And you
Well,
can choose whichever. Best, worst, favorite, wherever you wish to go.
yeah, I've just had so many good experiences supervising undergraduates here. There really is no worst one or just no bad one. But they've all been great. The best ones are ones where the student this happened a couple of times. Where the student has done something just completely surprising. Here is the project. This is what I think will happen. And the student sort of discovers something completely new along the way. So a couple summers ago, I had a student like that. I was co-supervising the student with someone else, and he just came back with a fantastic calculation that took the whole project in a new direction, and it led to a great paper, and we were really, really proud of that. And it's just because he was determined and also had a willingness to explore on his own, and had the right balance between sort of following instructions and doing his own thing. So that was rewarded, definitely. And I'll just add that back yonder, I was an undergraduate research assistant, and there are all sorts of funny experiences in that, and just one that I'll share. In fact, it's not a funny experience. It's an experience that could have happened. But in another life, I was an experimental physicist, and I worked 2 kilometers under the Earth's surface at the Sudbury Neutrino Observatory, and I worked there for 2 summers as an undergraduate researcher. And it was a completely different world from what I do now with mathematics, because nothing stops me from doing mathematics. I just pick up the pencil and I do it, or the chalk when I'm in the days of being on campus. But working in this massive neutrino lab underground, if the air conditioning didn't work, then no one could do anything, and it'd be 2 weeks where you couldn't do anything. So it's a completely different reality. But what was interesting was that in the summer of 2003, there was a massive power outage in North America. in the eastern provinces and eastern states. And it went on for 3 days. And the day that the great power outage happened, I was supposed to go underground, but didn't. At the last minute, something changed. And so at first, I was very sort of happy that I didn't get stuck underground for 3 days. But in retrospect, I think it would have been kind of interesting. And so, had the coin flipped the other way that day, I would have had this amazing story for you about how we were foraging for, eating pot noodles, in the dark, in a mine shaft, for 3 days. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. But, that's life. So I'll stop there.
Sounds like the beginning of a novel. That's where you can take that one.
Well, actually, they did write a novel about the submarine neutrino observatory. It's called Hominids. It's a science fiction novel, but it has nothing to do with the blackout.
No,
and I haven't read the book, so I can't recommend it.
That's Robert Sawyer, and he's a Canadian.
Exactly, yeah.
Who wrote that? That's fantastic. Amy, you're up next. What are your best, worst, or favorite stories of undergraduate research?
Well, as I have stressed, I'm still new at this. So I guess my best experience was this summer, especially because there would be days where I was a bit unenthusiastic because I couldn't get into the lab. And then I have a meeting with some undergraduates and they tell me something really cool about something that I haven't thought about. So that really would often make my day. And also they told me some things that I hadn't even considered, especially just with things about DNA and what kind of measurements we can use on that. So those are some great experiences, actually. But thinking back on my own lifetime, I guess, you're in the lab, especially with high-powered lasers. So, there's plenty of stories where you smell burning and you realize that the card you're using to look at the laser beam is set on fire, or your collaborator has given you, 5 milligrams of really precious material that they spent a year purifying, and then you drop half of it on the ground and you just want to cry. Or I don't know, some students I know also connected some equipment to a faulty power outlet, and that set on fire one day. And so there are plenty of things that will and do happen in a lab that you wouldn't think about, but luckily no one has been injured in my time. So I think someone did once get some sample in their eye and they had to flush it out with an eye wash, but that's about the most. So again, in a lab, anything will, and often does happen. So yeah, so there have been some fun times.
That's actually an incredibly reassuring thing, I think, for undergraduate students to hear, and that, yeah, we've all had our troubles. Yeah, exactly. Ray, over to you. What are some of your best or worst or favorite stories of undergraduate research?
So I will just sort of try to keep it brief, because I could say there's a lot of stories I could tell. The successful stories, because plenty of my students, undergraduate students, have published papers with us. Many of them have gone on to graduate school and have successful careers, and others have gone on to industry and have successful careers there. So not just academics. So there's lots of success. My favorite story, believe it or not, was from my very first undergraduate student at Acadia. This is a guy who went on to become faculty at Oxford, and he's now faculty at UBC. So this is a hard act to follow, right, for everybody else. But again, there's been plenty of success. I will throw in a few sort of common ingredients of when things don't work out so well. And I think the most common ingredient is if you're a summer undergraduate, you really do need to treat this opportunity as it is a job, like as it is serious, because the people who are you working with around you, their career is based on research. Like their living is based upon being productive and getting their research done, and they're passionate about it and they love to do it. If you're sort of, not so passionate about it, and, you show up late and you leave early and you don't really do what you're told, or you don't do, and you're just feeling that, you'd rather be doing something else, then this means it's maybe not for you for whatever reason. And I think that if there are any bad stories, that's maybe the one common element. It's somebody trying to force themselves into doing something they don't really want to do, I guess. Right? And that incongruency then shows up. But I thought I'd throw that in there because, well, it does happen.
It does.
Not to envy that.
I appreciate that you did, because absolutely to don't assume that you can enter into something that you're not sure about, or you think, oh, I don't know if I can spend all day in a lab. Like if that thought even goes through your head, maybe don't apply for a summer research job, or else go and visit the history department and see if you want to just spend your summer in an archive instead of in a lab like me. I'm a historian, so yeah, that's where you'll find me, not in a lab. I'm going to be watching the chat as I'll ask the last question of our panelists, but I'm going to be watching the chat. So if any of you students have questions that you would like me to send along to the professors, please put it into the chat. And my last question for you is, what advice do you have for students who might be looking for a position, particularly right now in this time of COVID? We don't have that in-person classroom experience. We can't knock on your door at 4 o'clock, bring you a coffee and say, hi, can we talk about research? Whatever it is. How do you have any particular thoughts or ideas around how students can, in our time of COVID, approach a professor and maybe get a research position? And Raymond, since you're up on my screen, maybe you can go first on that.
Sure, I'll be happy to. So I think in a way this is going to sort of summarize some of the stuff that we've heard. You can approach the professors, right? I don't think that's a problem. Send them an email and say, you know what, I'm this undergraduate student and I'm interested in doing some research in your lab this summer, but do your homework first, right? Don't send out spam to everybody in the department and just let's see who bites. Do your homework and say, and this is a benefit for everybody. Do the homework to find out what this person does and whether you're interested in it or not. Because if you're not interested in it, then this is a lose-lose proposition. If you're interested, then you can find out more. Say, hey, I hear you do electrical, simulation of electrical activity in the heart. I think that's really great. I'm interested in biology. I'm interested in these things. What more can you tell me about? Well, here's my background. I can program in this language. I've taken physiology courses. I'm good in math. What can you tell me more about? What about this research? And would you possibly have, a position in the summer? So that's, the first part. And then, while you're talking to the professor, make sure that, you do show the enthusiasm. We talked about that at first, and show that you have a good attitude. I mean, this is really when I interview the person, you can kind of tell whether this is going to work out or not, or you have a good sign right from the beginning. It's how do they the situation of not knowing exactly what they need to know ahead of time before they even start, right? You have to go in there. It's always on the job training. You always have to learn something new. You never know exactly what you need to know ahead of time, but you have the building blocks. But you always are supposed to have the building blocks that you can then turn into the thing that you need to do. So I would say there's not much difference. The idea of COVID-19, these COVID days. Why is it any different? I would say it is different in a way that you have to be an even better communicator, because you're going to be stuck on WebEx or Zoom, where there's a lot of lagging in the feed, the voice feed or the video, and you're going to be on your own. So you need to be able to work on your own without supervision, even more so. And conversely, you need to know how to reach out for help when you need to. Like if you're a people person, you need to be able to figure out how to get enough of that other stuff to make sure that it doesn't slow you down in the other areas. So that's what I would say.
Fantastic. Stephen or Amy, what advice might you have for students who are currently looking for a research position? And we do have a number of questions that are coming in on the chat too, but maybe answer that one too.
Stephen, do you want to go, or I can go?
Why don't you go, Amy? That's
Okay.
fine.
I would say, well, because Raymond really covered it perfectly, actually. The only thing I would add maybe is ask early. If someone asks me before other people, that might give them an advantage. Also, as professors, we're always looking for funding these days. So and a lot of those opportunities happen early. So just the earlier the better, I think is good. Other than that, I mean, as Ray and Stephen both said, writing a really nice introductory email, introducing yourself and saying exactly kind of what background you have that might be good for your research, for my research, would be good for me. Also, we would have, I guess, these days a meeting on Zoom or something to chat. And if there were some interesting questions that came from a student in that environment, I would definitely think about that in a favorable way. But yeah, and I don't think there's much that COVID has done to change this. The only thing, because a lot of my equipment is in the lab and now it might not be as accessible as, but pre-COVID. So I guess just being flexible with exactly what your project would be and how much time you would be able to spend in the physical lab is really important. But other than that, not much has changed, I think. So for me, so just apply early, show enthusiasm and that you're interested, and be ready to be a bit flexible with what kind of projects I can offer.
Stephen, anything to add?
Sure, and maybe, as always, Ray and Amy have done such a fantastic job. So maybe I'll transition into some of the questions as I go.
Absolutely.
So I'll just the only thing I'll add is, and Ray and Amy have both said it about the initial contact you have, making your case to the research supervisor. So I'll frame that in just a slightly different way as maybe what not to do. I mean, I wouldn't just send an email to a potential research supervisor or faculty member saying, I want to do research for you. You should have content in there. You should say exactly what your skills are currently. And you don't know exactly which skills you are going to need. And there are skills that you don't have right now, but you'd like to pick up. And I think that that's something that it speaks well to me when I see this. I'm versed in this. I've taken these courses, and I feel really confident with this technique. I'd really also like to learn this. And so treating, in some sense, these undergraduate research projects are a learning experience. And so that sort of recognition from the beginning that they're learning experiences and you really want to learn something, I think goes a long way. So, I would, like for me, if a student emails me and wants to do quantum computing, then, if they say, I've used IBM Q, that's a free, cloud-based quantum computing platform from IBM, and if they know Qiskit, that's a quantum computing language. Those are the kinds of things, the level of detail you want to mention. If you did really well in your differential equations course, then you can mention that too, that sort of thing. But also the things that you want to learn. I think that's a good way to start the discussion. And then just, scanning some of the questions here in the chat. First of all, Viom's summary at the beginning is excellent. Thanks, Viom. And then, maybe we'll go back a little bit later to the letter of recommendation. But the timing, like Amy said, contacting supervisors right away is the right thing to do. You want to get your foot in the door, and you have to imagine that there are many, many students who are contacting each supervisor. So, contacting early and being memorable somehow, I think is very important. And the only thing that's really different about that approach in the COVID time is that it's really up to you in that email to be memorable, as opposed to face-to-face. The question about, I do believe, so to answer Lucas's question, I do believe email is the best approach. You should initiate it that way. And sure, I think it shows your seriousness if you want to request, let's say, a WebEx meeting or a Zoom meeting. You should do that for sure. And you should be prepared with very specific questions about the research that you might undertake with the faculty member. Questions show your level of interest and how much thought you've put into what you might be doing. Yeah, I see that, lots of different sort of related questions here, but maybe I'll see if Amy or Ray have any thoughts on any of these
I
questions as
wanted
well.
to bring one question. A couple of students have kind of gone at this a couple of different ways, but if you're an earlier student, say a first or a second year student, as opposed to a third or a fourth year student, what are your chances of getting a research position? I've kind of summarized and rephrased what they have. They're basically wondering how much university experience do you need before a professor is willing to take you on as a research assistant? Amy or Stephen, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, maybe I'll just say from experience that almost all of the undergraduate students that I've supervised have been students who have completed the third year of study or the fourth year of study, and it's been in this, so the summers following those years. There's something about the level of training. It's nothing hard and fast here, but there's something about the level of training that sort of lends itself to an undergraduate project. But I have supervised, the first student I supervised at the University of Saskatchewan was, he'd just come out of second year. I was teaching him in his second year. I taught him 2 courses, and he was one of those students, when I say that, went above and beyond on every assignment. And it was sort of very clear that, he was going to be a very good research student. So I ended up hiring him. He was funded by a university, USRA. So this is a good case study. So he was, sort of going above and beyond on everything to do with the courses. He probably asked me about doing research in December, and that stuck out in my mind. And then he probably asked me again in January, and probably asked me again in January, and probably asked me again in February. I didn't, one option would have been to apply for an NSERC USRA, but that was my sort of first year here. I didn't do that. I applied for a university undergraduate summer research award, and we got it. That was in March, and then by April for sure he knew that he was being hired. And I said, he was a second year student, but it worked out fantastically, and we got a publication from it, and he presented a poster at the sort of earlier version of SURE. And yeah, it worked out well. So I would say that statistically, on average, students have a better chance if they're in their third and fourth year. It's just the way it goes. But that doesn't mean that you should not try if you're in earlier years.
I think that's a reasonable assumption. Ray or Amy, do you guys have any thoughts on that? I know that I have seen undergraduate students take research jobs and do very well even after their first or second year. In some of those cases, they might have done research at the high school level and done research project kind of work at the high school level. Again, it's sort of the difference between class-based work where you're just kind of doing what you're told versus going out and teaching yourself and doing an actual project. So sometimes a high school student might bring that to the table. And certainly I know that there are a number of great students who are on campus who maybe they're more senior students. They may be only in their first or second year, but maybe they did something else for a while first. So sometimes that works out as well in your favor. So I don't know if years of completion have that much to do with it. It's a general rule, but not hard and fast, as Stephen said.
I can say that this summer I had 2 students who had completed their second year, one of whom I taught in my Chemistry 115 course. The other student was actually in her first year, and again I taught her in my Chemistry 115 course. She was someone who I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to get funding for her because she asked me fairly late, but she kept talking to me over and over again about possibly being in my group and doing research. And in the end, I could get her some funding, and she was fantastic. She was just so enthusiastic and so willing to just try anything, basically. So, because I do not expect anyone who comes into my lab to know anything really about lasers or DNA folding or really anything. So all the training that they get from me is kind of literally on the job training. Here are some good references in textbooks. Here are some good papers that you should read that are understandable. Kind of consume those first, and then we'll go from there. So I would take anyone who has been in a lab a little bit and can kind of is comfortable enough to, you know, mix some solutions or something. And everything else I would, you know, when they come into the chemistry department, they have to do safety courses. That's the very first thing. We'll get them some keys for an office, and then we'll, you know, start thinking about the research. I'll take them into the lab, show them what kinds of things they might do. So it really is, almost anyone could apply. I really just, and that, you know, a first year can be just as good dealing with a laser as a fourth year undergraduate for me. So yeah, just kind of applying it, whoever seems most interested and like they have, will just be really comfortable in the lab, then yeah, I would definitely consider them. So that's my opinion.
That's fantastic. Ray, anything more to add?
No, I'm sort of, I would say that the process, you know, is very situation dependent. So it depends on the professor, it depends on the student, it depends on the project. It's open, you know, summer positions are open to everybody. So it depends on, you know, I like to think that I have a project for anybody who shows up on my door with the right attitude. Again, assuming that I have the funding for them. But yeah, I mean, you could find a first year person who's been programming for years, right? Because they've been interested in it for so long. So being in first year would certainly not be a hindrance. But I guess if you talk about sort of the law of averages, maybe, or just the way populations go, the further you are in the process. So if you finish 3 years, you're probably more mature than somebody who's finished 1. And so you're more able to work on your own. You're more able to tackle a harder problem. I mean, so there's just sort of there's a bit of a bias that way, but it's just a rule of thumb, if you will, because I think the exceptions are everywhere. So I don't know how much stock I would put in. I would not let, you know, how many years you're in actually affect anything, because you can go to a professor and find the right project. If you have the passion and the enthusiasm, I believe that those things trump the others.
It raises an interesting question. So I just wanted to kind of, just in our last couple of minutes, are there any other experiences outside of academia that you might look for? Are there particular desirable forms of experience outside of, say, marks that you might be looking for, or that you could maybe suggest?
You know, I would sort of take the view that Ray has been taking on a lot of things, that you know, programming languages, especially if you're in the sciences, are very, very important. And those are often, you know, if you're in a computer science degree, sure, you'll pick up various languages that way. But for a lot of other students, you pick them up sort of outside of your formal training in the university. So, you know, that's one thing. You know, I think that we're getting to a stage where coding is becoming a life experience. And so I think that, you know, anything you can demonstrate in that regard. You know, I'm definitely aware that, you know, the three of us can really only speak for the sciences, but, you know, I have an awareness that in the social sciences, for instance, coding is becoming much more important and much more prevalent than in past decades. I just think this is a really marketable skill for anything you do. And so anything you can demonstrate in terms of programming languages or coding, that I think that's great. And you know, one thing you can do if you've spent time coding is set up a GitHub or a portfolio for yourself that you can instantly point a supervisor to. So if you're not aware of it, you know, GitHub is a repository where you can, you know, display code publicly. You can keep track of changes. You can share it. You can fork off different versions. It's a very powerful tool. It's actually a skill in and of itself. But, you know, having some sort of repository of you know what, having a repository of any kind of work that you're proud of, you know, just going back, you know, stepping back from the coding, I think that's really nice, and it's professional, and it's something you can point supervisors to quickly. Is a great thing. It demonstrates so many things at the same time: your professionalism, your ability to communicate, your organizational skills. So, you know, definitely make some kind of portfolio for yourself. And I just want to sneak in a little comment, just you know, going back to the you know, first year versus third year, fourth year. Definitely, if you're interested in something like quantum computing or want to do a research project and you're in first year and you're passionate let me know. Don't be, don't be discouraged by anything.
That
You know,
sounds
just
like that's a
third,
pitch.
yeah, third year students, yeah, maybe they have an advantage, but like Ray said, just ask, and that's memorable in and of itself.
I think it's one of the interesting questions coming in on the chat or things, how do we measure the difference between marks and grades versus enthusiasm, and how do we figure that out? And you guys have talked about that quite a bit, but it's something that Vion, maybe we could watch the whole thing over again, and then you'd be able to pick up on some of those things. But one of the questions that came in is that what would a typical research project for an undergraduate look like? How would they formulate the question? What are students exactly supposed to do on a daily basis? This is an interesting, just kind of give us an overview of what that summer might look like. And I know that you're all in very different areas, so probably that the answer would be very different between the three of you.
I guess I can start off. So this year, because of COVID, I had all my 3 students. Initially, we had thought of lab-based projects, but that changed into literature reviews on different areas of research I was interested in. So one person did kind of a really nice review of some spectroscopic techniques, kind of absorption spectroscopy, and all the kind of information you can pull out of, say, an absorption spectrum that you might measure. So she was looking at things like that. Someone else was looking at kind of the history of DNA folding techniques and where kind of the current state of the art in the field is, like what have people done recently. And then someone was looking at how molecules interact with each other and what kind of applications to DNA and DNA structures that has. So I tried to kind of give them some interesting things that were also sort of interrelated so they could talk to each other as well, which was really actually quite nice. If I was in the lab, I'd probably start off with saying, okay, we have this really interesting sample. We want to do some basic characterizations of it. So that would be kind of, I would have to train them on some of the basic machines that I use. So absorption spectroscopy, fluorescence spectroscopy, and understanding exactly what each of these machines do, how you operate them, how you put the sample in, and how you interpret the results. Then if we wanted to get really enthusiastic and excited, we could then go down into our proper laser lab and use ultra fast lasers to analyze some properties of the lifetimes of these samples, which is, I would help them kind of align the laser system and understand how you deal with lasers, and then try again interpret the results. So it would probably be based on small parts of, I want to really figure out this thing for this molecule. Like, is this molecule by itself? Is it interacting with another molecule? Things like that. What is it doing in this solution? So kind of little projects around those kinds of ideas is something that I would offer.
Well, you can sign me up. Not that I know anything about a lab, but I don't know. Really? Origami? I'm in. Stephen or Ray, what does this summer project look like?
I'll just say quickly that it's really all about being somehow self-contained, because you have to have an awareness of the time limits, and these things often bleed out longer than 4 months in my opinion. They sort of they don't end suddenly, and they keep going for a while. And actually in our department, sometimes these turn into honors theses, and then you end up working for a whole year, 4 months paid, and then sort of 8 months as a year-long course. But I think keeping things self-contained, and so often giving you a piece of a much larger project, and you might not be able to see all of the gears working of the larger project, but you sort of have your gear to work on, and to sort of fit it into place. And just to give a concrete example, so this past summer I had a student learning Qiskit, this language I mentioned, programming language for quantum computers. He was using IBM Q to compile his quantum code, and we were looking at something called a variational quantum eigensolver. which is an algorithm that allows you to do calculations with an accuracy that would not be possible in a classical computer. And the goal was really just to learn the rudiments of Qiskit, learn how to compile on IBM Q, and to deploy this algorithm for an example that, to my knowledge, hadn't been explored yet, and to see what happens. So it was a very exploratory project, and we got some interesting results and observations out of it. And it was the kind of thing that was self-contained enough that it was good for 4 months, and it's good for the supervisor to sort of have some idea of what's going to happen. It's like, I really know that this is going to happen. But it was open-ended enough that the student could sort of experiment, and we saw some surprising things. So,
Ray, how about you? What does this project look like?
Yeah, I think that Steve's description is pretty right on, in the sense that, you come into my lab, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of people, a lot of projects. My job is to help balance the project, give the students something concrete and finite to work on, so that if they are somehow terminate and never come back to my lab after 4 months, that's okay, that what they've done is useful in the greater scheme. But at the same time, if they do want to come back the next year, or if they do want to continue over the winter, or they want to come back for graduate school, then there's something that has enough substance to allow them to do that. So this year, I had 3 undergraduates, 1 finished second year, 1 finished third year, 1 finished fourth year. 1 was a math and CS major. That person did a lot of software. We need to still sort of finish up. He did a lot of sort of working on, we needed to fix this little routine and that little routine. So a lot of stuff within the software. The other person was from electrical and computer engineering, and I basically gave her a problem. I said, I need this problem solved. It was an optimization problem. She knew nothing about optimization or sensitivity, but learned everything because she said, well, she wants to learn, and so she did. Partway through the summer, I had an idea of an IoT device that I wanted built, and of course she did it because she had that expertise and that interest. And that was something that sort of came out of the blue. Which happens with me sometimes. I just get an idea out of the blue and I say, okay, who can do this? And she was there, right person, right time, right place. And then the other student, who was the 4th year student, was more or less a pure math major. And again, in contrast, he did one thing. We had one problem. We sort of talked about the various things that he was good at and interested in. We had one problem, and he basically worked on it all summer, and we got a paper out of it at the end before he left to go to graduate school in Toronto. So it's really all over the place. You can see anything and everything, which is why you don't want to have too many presuppositions about what the future is going to look like. But I guess they really get into informants that could go beyond 4 months if they wanted to, but at the other hand, it was of value to the lab and to me beyond those 4 months as well.
It's interesting because in the story that you just told, you just answered the last question. On what basis are projects assigned to students? Is it according to their interest? And you pretty much just laid that out. For the most part, yes. You would work pretty hard to try and make sure that whatever project that you created was a good fit for that particular student.
So as we've said, enthusiasm is not just what you come in with, but also can you maintain it? And if if those things are not aligned, you can tell pretty soon that they're not aligned and that you need to work hard to realign them. Otherwise, it's not a good situation really for everybody.
I want to just say there were so many questions that came in on the chat. I'm cognizant of all of your time. You've given me an hour, and I'm so grateful. Thank you all very much for being here. I have copied all of the questions that came in on the chat. And I will send that around and answer them to the best of my knowledge and hook the 3 of you in to kind of, give your thoughts, although I think many of them you've already answered. And certainly if someone wants to go back through and listen to the recording again, I bet some of those questions would be answered. But thank you to the 3 of you for joining us today. And thank you for all the students for being here. and for the questions. And of course, as normal, our SURE students are good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. That was so interesting. So all of their thank yous are coming in right now. And we appreciate your time. We appreciate your energy. Thank you for having undergraduate students working with you. And thank you for your advice to the students today. We appreciate it very much.
No, thank you, Merle. This was a really nice opportunity to discuss with some other excellent professors their thoughts on undergraduate students. And I'm so glad so many people listen to us, and hopefully will come to our labs in the future. That will be amazing.
Yeah, thanks so much, Merle, and thanks to all the students for attending and for the great questions. And for a second, Merle, I thought you said I have copied. I thought you said I have coffee, and I was so but it's not that world anymore. So
no, not really. If I could figure out how to send all of you guys coffee through, I could send you Tim Hortons cards. That I can do.
Not necessary. Not necessary.
No, but no, I did do a quick copy and paste of all the questions that came in on the chat just to make sure that we capture the last few, and I'll send that around, and then I'll post it to the SURE students. And thank you so much for being with us today.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you for your efforts, Merle, too. Good to see you.
Our pleasure.
Bye-bye.